Hey guys, this is Lovely with LoveliEsteem, and welcome back to a new week. This week, we're going to have a conversation surrounding a topic that is very triggering for some people. We're going to be talking about suicide, and I'm warning you up front because I want to give you the option to say, nah, this ain't for me. I don't want to do this. This weekend, I had the privilege and the honor to attend a celebration of life for a young woman who changed the lives of everybody that she met. And there were so many accolades and so many kind words and so much generosity and so much love in that space, so much openness and vulnerability and togetherness and connectiveness that was inside of that room. However, that was not enough to save the person's life that we were celebrating, right? And within the Black community, there is a strong chokehold on talking about death, grieving, grief, loss, and it gets muddled up in this whole theology behind, the biblical reasons why this isn't acceptable, or, you have a lot of people who have not been able to properly grieve. They were never taught how to properly grieve when something like this happens, or they are still waiting for some answers to happen or answers to come about that will never happen. One of the best things that happened at the celebration of life was that the pastor who was speaking at the end, just admitted that he had his own trials and tribulations with regards to suicidal ideology, and he tried to end his own life. And he asked anybody who ever suffered from like depression or who ever thought about suicide to stand up and be embraced by the community that was surrounding them. He wanted to open up the discussion about suicide and depression and really kind of work on finding prevention and saving lives. And it was beautiful, but it really opened up. I've been talking about mental health and grief and grieving and loss and suicidal ideology, parasuicide, which I think that a lot of us have never even heard of, but kind of goes along with a lot of the destruction we see within our family patterns. So I wanted to talk about that because there needs to be more discussion surrounding suicide for prevention, right? You don't ever, when we have these conversations after someone has passed away, sometimes it feels so empty, right? It's like, why weren't you talking about that when they were here? Or why couldn't you see the signs when they were around? And the truth is, there are signs and then there aren't signs all at the same time. And if you've ever suffered from depression, even if it was situational, if you've ever suffered from, grief, if you've ever suffered from anxiety or panic, you understand that there are times where you can almost mask what's going on if you attach it to something else that kind of disrupts the person who's asking you's thought pattern, right? So I just wanted to talk about some of the statistics, have open dialogue and conversation regarding where we are now, some of the myths, and really just ask a lot of questions that we don't particularly usually ask each other until we're standing inside of a funeral home or in a church and we're mourning the loss of somebody and we're waiting to receive answers, and there are no answers, right? Because when something like suicide happens, there's so many different pieces of shrapnel that's released from that bomb, right? So it's the initial loss of the person, and then anybody that they're attached to, be it spouse or parents or siblings, close friends, and then it kind of spreads out through the community because those close friends or family that's affected by it, then they touch somebody and it kind of ripples out. If you were a part of a church, part of a sorority, a fraternity, if you were a part of a reading group, if you were in a band, if you worked at the market, and people kind of hear. And then what happens is that once the funeral is over, the people who the shrapnel touched first are left with so many questions with no answers. And honestly, in this situation, a lot of people will never receive the answer that they need, because the answer that they want is the physical person being alive to have the discussion with, so they can figure out what they could have done better. And we know that at this point in time, that's not something that we have the option to have. And I just want to give some data because I'm very fact based for the most part. But then I want us to like have a full conversation and leave you with some thoughts so that you can maybe look around, kind of see if you are around anyone, if you've touched anyone, if you are the person who's going through a couple things, and figure out if this is something that is really affecting your life as well, because we make the assumption that we can get out of this. This depression isn't going to take me down. And sometimes it doesn't. Some people can fight back. They can fight through the fucking pits of fire to get back. But there are some people who this disease attaches itself to, and it literally steals the soul from them. And it creates this deficit that allows all of these self-doubts to sit in. It allows all of these empty questions to fester. It allows a lot of judgment and shame and guilt to sit there. It allows you to get to a place where it almost becomes quiet and calm before the storm really takes you under. And I know that because I've suffered from suicidal ideology. I've suffered from thoughts of taking my own life. I've suffered from feeling like life would be better if I wasn't here. I've suffered from contemplating and attempting and being unsuccessful. But I feel like for me, when it didn't work, because of the kind of personality that I have, I started fighting. And the fight was sloppy, and it was uncomfortable, and it was frustrating, and I felt like I was losing a lot of the time. I learned how to pretend very well. I learned how to camouflage very well. I've learned how to exist without existing very well. But in that fight and in telling the truth, I've learned how to engage with my depression. I've learned how to engage with those thoughts and start breaking them down. I learned how to fight the thoughts that sometimes fester and really figure out what the truth is. And everybody has their own truth. Everybody has their own answers. Everybody has their own set of requirements. And one size does not fit all when it comes to fighting through depression and suicide ideology, anxiety, panic attacks, grief, loss, shame, and guilt. Everybody has a whole different sector. But some of the things that we can talk about as a group is how we can move further into a connected conversation, when we can tag a person in when we're not feeling well, when we can have open conversations about feeling like we've lost connection with our soul, or we've lost connection with our spirit, we've lost connection with our religion, we may have lost connection with our mental health. We've lost connection with that which makes us feel like we are fully us. Sometimes we've never been able to be fully us out of childhood trauma, or trauma that we've experienced as teenagers or adults, things that we haven't been able to deal with, people that are still in our lives who are toxic and unwilling to work on themselves, situations that we're in that we cannot get out of right now, toxic work environments, toxic home environments. Because if you don't have a safe space to admit that something's wrong, you just learn how to hide it better. You learn how to sit in it better. You learn how to live with it. And sometimes you turn it into like your frenemy. You create spaces for it to live so that you can keep watch on it, but you never are able to fix it or get it under control. So I said, all right, Lee, you're all into facts. What are we gonna do? How are we gonna talk about this? About 2 years ago, I wrote in my notes because I was doing some research about suicide and depression. And what I wrote was, the discussion surrounding suicide or suicidal ideology may feel like a sensitive subject to broach. However, reading a loved one's obituary is a devastating and traumatic event to experience. Tackling the topic of suicide and opening up the lines of communication in your household may save lives. Your loved ones' lives are worth a few uncomfortable moments. Be good to you and others. And sometimes I write stuff and I just leave it there because I don't know what it's for. Like, I may wake up in the middle of the night with some thoughts, or other times I may be doing some research and then I may get to a point where I'm like, I don't know enough. Let me research some more.